At the age of 31, Silicon Valley entrepreneur Samir Bhatia was diagnosed with leukemia. Doctors informed him that due to his South Asian descent, the chances of him getting the bone marrow transplant he so desperately needed were 1 in 20,000. However, Samir saw this as a challenge. Using social media outlets such as YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and others, Samir and his friends challenged people to register their marrow. In 11 weeks, Samir and his friends got 24,611 people to register their marrow, resulting in his own transplant. Unfortunately, Samir passed away a few months later due to complications. But in the 2 years since his passing, over 250 lives have been saved. And Samir is not the only one using social media to his advantage. In fact, a Walden University study of 12,000 participants in 11 different countries showed that 29% of young adults are using social media in their activism. The influx of technology has begun to change the way that society embraces and goes about social change. Utilities such as email, Facebook, Twitter, blogs, and other media have made propagating our own personal message and agendas so much simpler and more efficient. As opposed to standing on street corners and asking the average passerby to sign a petition, there's a website or an email chain for that. As opposed to going door to door and asking for a donation, a simple text message or PayPal donation expedites the process. While social media makes the task of propagating a message simpler than ever before, the role of this technology in activism is passionately debated. Some maintain that online networks are an integral aspect of our new activism, while others argue that this diffuses the true intentions of activism. Popular culture is becoming more and more intertwined with technology. And therefore, I wanted to ask the question, what role does social media play in activism today? By leveraging all of the tools that currently exist, we can make the largest difference in the world, which is the inherent goal of service and activism. But to talk about social networks, it's important first to discuss how these networks work. I would argue that social networks are key to activism today. In 1973, Mark Granovetter, former department chair of sociology at Stanford, made a bold claim about the way in which information spreads between networks. He split an individual's connection into two groups, strong and weak ties. He established these by accounting for a combination of the amount of time, mutual confiding, and intimacy between the two individuals. He said that strong ties are the small group of people closest to an individual, or, in this network, the blue. He then said that the weak ties were the friends and acquaintances of an individual, or, in this network, the green. He argued that weak ties play an important role not only in propagating information, but defining the courses of our lives and helping us align with our interests. In 1961, University of Chicago professor Anatole Rappaport and his colleagues made a study about the strength of ties through 861 students at a Michigan junior high school. They asked each student to list their top 8 friends in order, and then trace how many students could be connected by their first and second choices versus their 7th and 8th. They found that the largest connectivity was established by using the 7th and 8th ranked friends of the randomly sampled students. Even without online networks, research began to show that the greatest number of people were connected through their weak ties, thereby defining the way that we disseminate information. Though we interact most frequently with our strong ties, we intercept the largest portion of our information from the farthest corners of our web. Then, suddenly, along came the internet. And suddenly our connectivity to our weak ties was stronger than ever before. Social interaction was no longer limited to the vocal or the physical. In fact, people could actually meet and interact without ever physically encountering each other, making a platform for our weak ties. This allowed people to organize based on interests, commonalities, and passions, along with their previously established network, or stronger ties. Along with this phenomenon came a lot of opinion about the role of technology and these networks in activism, including, most famously, an article by Malcolm Gladwell. In his article, Small Change, Why the Revolution Will Not Be Tweeted, Malcolm Gladwell proposed how the current generation has become too congratulatory about the role of social media in our activism today. He cited an example from the civil rights movement, discussing students in Greensboro, North Carolina, who sat at a Woolworth's counter reserved for whites day after day to protest not being served based off of the color of their skin. He argued that activism is initiated and maintained by networks of strong ties, whereas weak ties do not maintain the power to motivate great change. He says, social networks are effective at increasing participation by lessening the level of motivation that participation requires. The internet can promote causes between weak ties, but fails to inspire the movement that strong ties can be responsible for. While the number of messages is going up, the effect of each of these messages is going down. Activism via social media outlets can be termed slacktivism, bringing about social change through low-cost activity, which Gladwell argues cannot inspire great movements such as the students in Greensboro, North Carolina. Gladwell continues that Samir's case allowed for large numbers involved because it asked for simple and little personal investment or sacrifice. Being a match for a bone marrow donation is extremely unlikely, as well as leads to a simple outpatient procedure. Gladwell emphasizes the difference between online and physical interaction. While internet activism is noble and useful, unless the cause is catered toward large numbers and minor participation, it's completely ineffective. So this raises the question, is Gladwell right? Well, yes and no. Gladwell presents activism as either something done online or physically, when they tend to in fact be interwoven. The two forms of activism can be combined to cast an even wider net of impact into the world. Recent movements such as Invisible Children or Occupy Wall Street point toward using computers to get people away from their computers. Therefore, in my research, I've determined the forefront of effective activism lies in combining online networks with physical action, a discipline some call networked activism. Networked activism harnesses Granovetter's notion of social ties to use networks of strong and weak to create the largest impact. By leveraging both personal connections and extensive networks, activism has more power than ever to mobilize a large community of individuals, all passionate about a particular issue. An individual's strong ties are their greatest advocates. They're more likely to share consistent passions and be willing to aid each other. Activism catered toward appealing to the masses, however, must appeal to the ability of weak ties to propagate a message. The most effective forms of activism, then, must leverage these two complementary networks to appeal to the masses while still involving a small core of individuals to steer the movement. While networked activism presents the blanket term for the most effective form of activism, it falls short of outlining the specifics. So I would like to identify, from my research, how I think the term can be applied. While the act of signing an online petition or joining a cause on Facebook can be seen as kind of superficial, networked activism encourages the leveraging of the use of the instant propagation of information online to reach the most people, to then motivate them to act in more meaningful ways. I believe networked activism uses the internet for three things: information, dissemination, and organization. And these three things lead to more effective activism. This is best exemplified by change.org, a website that informs people, asks them to sign a petition, and then act in their own communities. Of its 500,000 users, studies show that nearly half of these people had never participated in any form of activism or advocacy preceding their first visit to the website. These people, now better informed and more equipped to go out into their own communities and foster great change. Networked activism should be groups of strong ties bound by a cause to appeal to weak ties of the internet to inspire appropriate physical action within their own communities. This leads to well-educated people dedicated to change all around the world. In the case of Samir Badia, 24,611 people registered their marrow. And while only 1 in 10 of these people will have to do more than just swab their cheek and send in a sample, 250 lives were saved. And on top of that, tens of thousands of people were educated about leukemia, the bone marrow registry, and what they can do to help. Think about this concept applied to other causes. Strong ties can use online media and social networks to educate the masses, engage the previously unaware, and mobilize larger numbers. Rather than counteracting or replacing physical activism, I believe networked activism would amplify its impact.